We have just built this new city. It is a fresh canvas. How we make use of it is actually very, very important because it has tremendous land value. Because as you know, it's a part of Colombo district now and Colombo city itself. So it has some tremendous value. So whatever we do there must be providing that kind of a value to the country. That is why we thought it is best that we highlight it or we market it or we position it as a international financial city which would enable it to really yield value to the country. So I think what is important is that there is intrinsic value in the project, but the second part of it is how do we bring out that value? How do we ensure that that value actually is received by the people as well as by the country? Now to do that, we have to have a legal framework as well as an administrative framework that will make it efficient, that will make it effective, that people will seek out this place and come and then use it as a chosen destination. All over the world there are cities of this nature. In fact, there are about 5,000, but very few are really successful. There are only about 100 that are really successful and comes to mind. The top amongst them are Singapore, Dubai, Shenzhen, that kind of names comes to your mind. So we are competing with that. So if you are going to compete with that kind of competition, we have to have very effective administration having in place here, then only we can yield the results. So to do that, we have developed a special law where there is a single window through which all investors can get their tax benefits or their services or whatever else that they require to do in that city can be then provided through this single window, so that they don't have to like what normally happens in Sri Lanka, where they will be sent from pillar to post or they are asked to rustify somewhere to get their work done. So this is the purpose of this law, and once that law is effectively put in place by the commission that we are choosing, then you will find that people will come to this place in order to get their work done. It's always best that all those environmental concerns and all are dealt with, and that's why before 2014, in fact around 2012 I believe, the initial work as to the impact of the new city was very carefully assessed, and the environment implications were done, the traffic implications were done, the business implications were looked at. So there are a lot of things that were done in order to ensure that it doesn't in any way have a negative impact on any of our normal living conditions as well as our administrative procedures. So that has been done, and I believe that is important in any city. Wherever we may even put up a building, that is important, and that has happened here too. As I said, this project is to provide a single window. There are 5,000 such cities all over the world. Those cities are functioning without any problem. I think this was a canard that was put in place by a few opposition members who actually know that this will be a turning point in Sri Lanka's economy. They know that they'll have to kiss goodbye their own ambitions of coming into power in the next perhaps decade or so, and they will never be able to do that once this city really takes shape and it is successful. So I think from that side of the coin only they are looking at it and then bringing up this story, because there's absolutely nothing in this law which suggests that there can be any threat to sovereignty or any threat to Sri Lanka's territorial integrity or Sri Lanka's security, nothing of that nature. So even by any stretch of imagination, You can't think of like that. So that's why they have developed various stories, just like the golden horses or the Lamborghinis that were done in 2014 in order to bring up a different viewpoint. But there's absolutely nothing like that, and I think it's sad that the opposition is resorting to that kind of ruse. Actually, once our new government came into office, we took a very clear policy decision that we'll try to reduce as much as possible our debt making projects, so that we will be curtailing our debt, because during the last government they borrowed about $10 billion in international sovereign bonds at very high rates of interest. So they are putting pressure on our economy. So what we are searching for is non-debt inflows into the country, forex inflows which are not creating a debt. Now this particular project, where there is an investment of $1.4 billion, is a non-debt creating inflow as far as Sri Lanka is concerned. This project has been done by the Czech Port City, not by Sri Lanka. We have not spent a cent on this project. So as a result of that, we would be now having asset in this country which is going to generate income, which is going to generate GDP, which is going to generate taxes as a result of the GDP being generated here, for which we haven't put any money down. Then in addition to that, Sri Lanka will receive as much as 62 hectares of land. And even at the rate of about $2,500 for a square meter of land, we should be able to receive at least $1.5 billion or more, which means that these are the additional benefits that Sri Lanka is going to get, and we are not in any debt at all. So that's why I think it sits very well in our overall plan of non-debt inflows, as well as foreign exchange inflows coming into the country, and economic activity being generated, and employment being generated. All those factors are met with this project. Actually, that was not a Supreme Court decision. It was our government's reaction to some of the concerns that people were expressing. Supreme Court did not give any direction on that. Now, we also know that the government, that the people of this country were concerned because of what happened in the past when the last government appointed a foreigner to the post of governor of the central bank. And we all know about what happened, and as a result of that, people are now wary whether it could happen again, and whether these top positions being manned by people who are not Sri Lankans could in any way affect the Sri Lanka's forward march for the future. That's why people are concerned, because now today we can't still find him, and we can't get him to come and face the law. So, as a reaction to that Sri Lanka has to grapple with that. And the fact that the people had said that this could happen, we have, as a responsible government, we have reacted to that in the positive way. And the President said that we would have a majority of the Commission members to be Sri Lankans, and that the Chairman also would be a Sri Lankan. So that situation has been handled in that fashion, and there is no further worry that anyone would have as a result. Well, it is in that route, but it's not part of the China plan. It is a city that is being developed in Sri Lanka, and it's part of Sri Lanka, and it's part of the Colombo district. So whether it can fit into that particular mold, or whether it can be a geographical location where the East and the West can both do business at the same time through Sri Lanka, or whether it is a city that is chosen by many people because of its geographical location as well as the time zone, is up to the person who is making the investment. So I think in that sense, we are lucky that various people can find various reasons in order to come in and be a part of this commercial city. And whichever way that they look at it, if we are having the benefit of those investments coming to Sri Lanka, then we will certainly be happy to welcome those. One point that I didn't, I think, mention to you about this debt trap that you mentioned, I didn't specifically mention that at that time. Now, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, we were never in a debt trap. We, at that time when people were talking about being in a debt trap, I think it was only designed in order to sell the Hambantota port at that time. The previous government did that because our debt to GDP ratios were all in very good shape. We had absolutely no problem about paying off the loans that were taken in order to build the Hambantota port. So that this was all a facade that was built in order to try to get Sri Lanka's port off its books. So we were never in a debt trap, but I must say Sri Lanka was talking about this Hambantota port from the time I was a kid. So many people are talking about it, but it never got done. Finally got done when President Mahinda Rajapaksa was the president, and then there was a very clear attempt to get it done. So I thought I would mention that as well. No, we are in agreement with that. We always took the view that if there are any clauses which the Supreme Court finds needs amendment, we'll be happy to do that. That was our stance from the beginning. We of course had a certificate, a confirmation from the Attorney General that it was in line with the Constitution. But as in the case of any legislation, there will always be certain areas where even though the Attorney General may have said it is in order, that the Supreme Court may determine otherwise, which is the case in certain instances. But we were very clear from the beginning. We said as far as the government is concerned, if there are any changes that are proposed by the Supreme Court, then we will go ahead with it. Now, we also had the option of certain clauses being enacted with a 2/3 majority. And as you know, we did have a 2/3 majority. So we didn't opt for that. We were very clear that we would like to only have those clauses that are consistent with the Constitution without even having a 2/3 majority. So although we did have a 2/3 majority in the case of the voting, we did not want to exercise that, and we still made sure that only the clauses which had the approval of the Supreme Court with regard to the normal basis of majority would be made into law. Nowhere in the world do you discuss it with the opposition before you bring in the law. I think this opposition must have got it all wrong, because legislation is introduced by the government. Once the government introduces a legislation, everyone else can look at it. They can comment on it. They can go to court on it. They can file action against it. So that is the freedom that is enshrined in our Constitution for people to comment on a law, to oppose a law, challenge a law, all that is there. Now all those were followed. So government didn't do anything irregular. Government brought in the law. It went to the cabinet. It went to the legal draftsman. It went to the Attorney General. It went to court. Finally, the court determined what clauses need amendment. Then it was brought into Parliament. Parliament debated it for 2 days. Certain changes were made at that stage also, because we felt that certain other amendments were needed. Then it was put to the second reading. Then it was put to the third reading, and then the normal course of passing legislation was followed. Absolutely nothing was done outside the law. Now, we have seen other instances where it has not been followed by the previous government. I don't want to comment on that. But in this instance, I can dare anyone to challenge as to where we did not follow the rules. We followed everything exactly to the letter. And then thereafter, we passed it in the normal course of events. After a 2-day debate, we could have had a debate for half a day. We didn't. We allowed any amount of discussion to take place. And certain points that came up at the debate were also taken into consideration when the final law was framed. So I think government was very clear that it did everything in the right way in order to get this law right. Because we think it's a very important legislation. It's going to be the turning point in our history, in our economic history. So we don't want to get it wrong. We don't mind 2 days of debate for that. And we welcome that. So it's a good thing. And in the future also, we hope to have legislation on that basis. Not at all. What we are hoping to do is, we are ensuring that the functions that were done even by those acts are all taken over by this new commission, and then that is handled by them. The commission can discuss with anyone else about the need to have certain other frameworks in place, or whatever other additional areas that need to be handled, and all that can be done by the commission. But the whole purpose of this law was to ensure that the investors who come and who are now going to invest in this area are not being driven from pillar to post. If they have to go from everywhere to get their approvals, to get their services, they don't want to come in and work here. Even under the BOI, I'm told people have to go to 18 different places. If you ask people who are doing business to get one simple approval, sometimes they may have to go to 5, 6, 8, 10 places, spend 7, 8, 10 weeks. Now, who is the investor who will come in here and invest $50 million or set up a new institution and is trying to generate new work, who wants to hang around in some corridor waiting for an approval to come from somewhere which is being delayed indefinitely? So, in order to ensure that those inconveniences are eradicated, that is the purpose of this law. So that law then has to ensure that some of the other delays that could be caused by certain other institutions through the other laws are not coming into focus here. And if the commission wishes to consult those other agencies, commission is free to do that, but not the investor. We are not telling the investor to go there and rustify there. If there is any need to get some input from a government agency or a government regulatory authority, it is the commission's duty to go and get that. We have amended it. Supreme Court itself has already given a way out for that. The Supreme Court was kind enough to propose the way in which it could be amended so that disability is addressed, and we followed that. So, as I mentioned earlier, there can be certain instances where the Supreme Court may have a different view of that of the persons who proposed the bill or those who approved it, as like the Attorney General. And that is always the case. That is why you are having the additional layer where the Supreme Court is also invoked, and that is in our law. Otherwise, once the Attorney General gives the approval, it could have very well have been passed as law. But the fact that that layer has been put in place in our Constitution shows that we are conscious that this could happen. So the Supreme Court has in their own wisdom, they have proposed certain changes to that, and the government in its humility as well as in its ability to work with other agencies of government, has accepted that. And we are now enacted the law with none of those disabilities, because in accordance with the Supreme Court's own suggestion and proposal, we have amended the law by the time it was approved. Yes, this time with the third wave as well as the law being only passed now, there is a delay. But certainly this has potential. This port city has the potential to draw those investments. So how soon we get it going, how effective our commission is, how well we are going to market these will be the determining factors of that realization of those investments. Now, this is the plan. Our plan has to be implemented. That's why we need to do it fast. That's why we need to do it right. So, when people were delaying it, and then they wanted this delayed further, giving various excuses by the opposition. That's why the government was keen that we have this law, because I think everyone would like if additional $2 billion comes into the country by way of investment. But that's why the government was determined to do that. Even in the context of various other challenges, we were keen to pass this law so that we can start work fast and not just dilly-dally and wait. So I think those numbers may not be realizable this year, but certainly we must work hard at realizing those numbers, because I can very well tell you that it has the potential to do that. Last year, the government spent about 92 billion rupees, 91 or 92, I forget, 92. Then this year, so far, we have spent 40 odd billion rupees so far, and our total spend so far is about 138 billion rupees. So that's a lot of money, which has covered the vaccines, the medicines, the changes made to the way in which we operate our hospitals, the concessions that we have given, the handouts that were given to people. So that's a lot of amount of money that was spent. Then in addition to that, government also arranged for moratoriums of loans, as you would have known. Now that has been another massive support that was provided to people who have borrowed. About 1/3 of the people who had borrowed from the banks as well as the finance companies in our country were given this moratorium. That means they were given an additional year to pay their loans. So that's another massive advantage that people received as a result of government policy. Then we reduced the interest rates. That happened, of course, before the COVID, but we maintained that even through this difficult period, we maintained interest rates at very low levels so that people didn't have to pay very high interest rates, and that's what kept them going. Then, in addition to that, we provided loans at 4% interest. I don't think any other government would have even dared to do that. The loans itself touched more than 52,000 account holders, and the amount that was dispersed was about 165 billion rupees. So, awful lot has been done from the monetary angle in order to provide that support to people, and that I think held us in good stead, and that is why even in the context of these massive challenges, Sri Lanka's economy was still able to only register a reduction in their growth rate only became minus 3.6%, when in other countries it had been in the range of about 10% in many countries. So I think we have done reasonably well, but this year we got to make sure that we have a positive growth. reasonably good positive growth. That's why the way we finish with this third wave as fast as possible is also going to be vital. We received some loans from the World Bank to buy the vaccines that we had to pay back. So that means it's like someone getting a loan and getting an overdraft and buying medicine, but you have to pay your loan. So it's your own loan that you have to pay back. So as to whether you borrowed or not, it doesn't really make a difference. It only helps your cash flow. So at this moment of time, with the World Bank giving about $80 million was helpful. So has small loans come from other agencies as well, but nothing of any substantial value. But everything else had to be done with the government's own funds, which is quite a challenging task, and we have been doing that. Exports have held, and we have found that in certain months in the recent past that it has actually done better. So we are quite pleased with that, and even in the context of all these difficulties, that we have been able to keep our exports going. Where we have done very well is the remittances. I think certain policy actions we took also has helped the remittances to grow, but growth of around 20% year on year is a very substantial growth, and we are very pleased about that as well. Unfortunately, the oil prices are rising again, and with the reduction in the very high reduction in the tourism earnings, we are confronting a challenge at this moment of time, and that's something that we are hoping we can put behind us as fast as possible, and that's why the vaccinations are very important. So hopefully if we get the vaccinations in, and then we are able to open our doors to tourists as well without any risk, that would be extremely helpful, because we need those inflows to come in. So this has been a difficult period, and we have, I think, been able to tide through the difficulties so far with a lot of very bold as well as innovative steps as far as the economic management is concerned. However, I would say that the next few months are also crucial, and we need to be very much on top of the situation in order to steer through this difficult period. I think the general procurement of the vaccines have been very encouraging, and we have been assured of supplies from both China and Russia, where we hope to procure at least 10 million doses from Russia, the Sputnik, and about another 3.5 million doses from China, which is Sinopharm. But we have requested more. But as you know, there is a massive demand for vaccines from all over the world, and those suppliers also are having very critical challenge in supplying as much as the other countries want. We had a very clear supply chain where it was open from India for the AstraZeneca. We got the first doses. In fact, we got about 900,000, and we needed another 600,000. But that 600,000 doses were delayed because of the spike in India. And I saw recently that the Indian government has been criticized for even selling these vaccines to other countries in the midst of their own difficulties. But I think what we need to now understand is we have to have several suppliers, several sources from whom we can get these vaccines, and hopefully we can get on top of the situation. We'll need about at least 20 million doses, because some we have to give 2 per person, and the lines have been very clearly established in order to have the sources to receive it, but now it will be a question of delivery. And I think we are vaccinating quite fast, and there is plenty of plenty of stocks coming in, which will ensure that there will be a steady vaccination program that we can implement.